Hey everyone, today we are going to start talking about the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents. So all three of these values are going to represent the same thing. They're just going to represent it in a slightly different way. Now there are plenty of places that we see fractions, decimals, percents. We've just been doing ratios and we did multiplying and dividing fractions. We did it with word problems. We look at decimals all the time in terms of money and weights and different things like that. Percents are everywhere. Over Black Friday, you probably noticed a number of sales ads that have percents in them. Your test scores are written with percents. So now we're going to talk about how these numbers are related to each other. We are going to start with the fractions and move to decimals and percents, and then we are going to start with decimals and then go to fractions and percents, and then we are going to do percents and then go to decimals and fractions. So I'm actually going to do this in 3 separate videos. So there's going to be one where I start with fractions, that's going to be this one, and then I'll do one where I start with a decimal, and then the last one where I start with a percent. First, we're going to talk about what a percent is. A percent is a number out of 100. So when we talk about percent being part of a whole, that whole is 100. So when I want to talk about how fractions, decimals, and percents are related, I need to have that fraction or decimal related to something that is out of 100. So when I look at 7 over 10, I want to know, can I get this to be something out of 100? And the answer is yes. I'm going to multiply by 10 on both the top and the bottom. Now, when I multiply by 10 on both the top and the bottom, this number on top, that's 70, that's my percent. Because 7 out of 10 represents 70 out of the whole 100. So 70 out of 100 would be 70%. Now, when I want to go from a percent to a decimal, and I'm going to rewrite my percent here in this middle area, I need to remember that my decimal is going to be at the back of this number. And when we change a percent to a decimal or a decimal to a percent, we are either multiplying or dividing by 100 depending on the situation. So in this first one, we're trying to go from a percent to a decimal. So I want to do 70 divided by 100. Now, when I'm working with powers of 10, 100, 1000, it's all about moving the decimal. The reason we like to work with powers of 10 is because all we have to do is move the decimal when I multiply or divide. So in this one, when I want to do 70 divided by 100, this over here, this 70 divided by 100, that means move the decimal to the left 2 times. So I'm going to take this decimal that I've drawn in here, and I'm going to move it to the left 2 times. 1, 2. And I'm going to get 0.70. And I can see through all 3 of my boxes in my chart here, 70 out of 100, 0.70, 70%, they all have those same values in them because they all represent the same number. And then I know that the value that I started with, because it is equal to 70 over 100, can be represented by those other 2 numbers. Now 9 over 15, when I look at 9 over 15, I cannot get directly to 100. That's not going to work. But we just did a whole bunch of scaling forward and scaling backward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify this fraction first. And that's where that simplest form comes in handy. If I don't have a fraction in simplest form, I can make it into 1. So 9 and 15 have a 3 in common. So this becomes a 3 over 5. And then I can get to 100 by multiplying by 20. So 3 times 20 is going to be 60. And again, that number can go in my percent category as 60%. And then I'm going to take that 60%, I'm going to divide by 100. And dividing by 100 is the same as moving the decimal 2 places to the left. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and I get 0.60. And you can even see, like in the chart, when going from a percent to a decimal, we're moving to the left in the chart. So we're going to move our decimal to the left in that situation. Now in this third one, we have 4 and 16 out of 25. And I'm going to look at this fraction. I'm going to say, can I get this to be something out of 100? The answer is yes, but I need to keep that 4 that's in front. That 4 is important. It's there for a reason. It represents a value bigger than 1. So this is going to be a percent that's bigger than 100. So now I want to go from 25 to 100. I'm going to multiply by 4. So 16 times 4 is 64. Now my percent is going to be all of this, because 64 out of 100 is 64%, but I don't just have 64%. I have this whole number that's in front. So it's actually going to be 464%. So now I'm going to take that 464%. My decimal is still at the end. And when I divide by 100 or move that decimal 2 places to the left, this is really important. I'm not going all the way to the front of the number. That's too many jumps. I need to go 1, 2 places. So this is going to be 4.64 as my decimal. Now, in all 3 of these, what I want you to notice, the 0.70, the 0.60, and the 4.64, is that 64 is over 100. There's 2 zeros. 60 is over 100. That's 2 zeros. 70 is over 100. That's 2 zeros. And there's 2 decimal places in each of these numbers, because that's how powers of 10 are related to decimals. So now we're going to look at the next one. And the next one says 125 over 200. Now I could go back to 100. I could do 200 divided by 2 and go back to 100. But that doesn't work out great with the 125. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my knowledge of powers of 10. And I'm going to say, okay, if 100 meant 2 decimal places, I can get this one to go to 1,000. And I can use those 3 zeros to help me with my decimal places. So to get from 200 to 1,000, I'm going to multiply by 5. So I'm going to multiply this one by 5 as well. Now 125 times 5 is going to be 625. Now again, I talked about these 3 zeros. Those 3 zeros represent the number of decimal places that you need. So what I'm going to do in the middle here is, instead of going to a percent, because I don't have a number that's out of 100, I'm going to go to a decimal first, and I'm going to say, okay, I've got 3 zeros. That means 3 decimal places, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to fill in that 625. So there's my decimal. Now I'm going to go from a decimal to a percent. So 0.625. I have my decimal right here. Now, to go from a percent to a decimal, I divided by 100. So I move the decimal 2 places to the left. If I want to go from a decimal to a percent, so I want to go the other direction, I need to multiply by 100 or move the decimal 2 places to the right. So 1, 2. Now in this one, it ends up in between the 62 and the 5. So it's in between the 2 and the 5. So when I write my percent, it's going to be 62.5%. So it's just like the 464% where the decimal didn't move all the way to the front of the number. This one does not move all the way to the back of the number. Okay? So I've given you 3 really solid examples of how to go from a fraction to a percent first and then back into the decimal. And then this last one, kind of funky, going from the fraction to a decimal first by using that power of 10 to help us get the decimal places, and then going from a decimal to a percent. Okay? The biggest takeaways here that I want you to see is using powers of 10. So using numbers like 10, 100, 1,000 to help us. And then I want you to see the movement back and forth between between decimal and percent. So to go from a decimal to a percent, we're moving the decimal place to the right 2 times, because 100 has 2 zeros, so it's 2 decimal places. And then if I'm going from a percent to a decimal, I'm moving it to the left or going backwards 2 places again, because dividing by 100 moves the decimal 2 places to the left. I'm going to leave these last couple for you to try and practice. So there's one where you're going to scale forward to 100, and then one when you're going to scale backward and forward.